Welcome to the Big Hot Money Show. And with us for the hour, Bahnsen Group founder and managing partner David Bahnsen. Well, just this morning, the president floated a reduced 80% tariff on China. A bit of an olive branch, perhaps, as U.S. tariffs create massive pressure on China's exports. Meanwhile, on Wall Street, the S&P 500 has nearly erased its losses since the Liberation Day tariffs announcement, and the NASDAQ is up almost 20% from its bear market low. So, David Bahnsen, I come to you first on this. Let's talk about the China weekend, and let's talk about the reduction to 80% going into that weekend. What do you make of it?
That 80% is going to end up being 50, and so I figured out this art of the deal complexity. It's at 145, it goes to 80, it ends at 50, and then they talk. And, you can't do anything at 80. You can't do anything at 145, so they're the same. 50, there's some trade that starts to happen, albeit expensively, but it thaws things a little while they enter into some good faith discussions.
Okay, and
I think that the people I'd be watching most are not the guys who got the 20% tariffs with their lobbyists and lawyers and the big multi-trillion-dollar companies. It's the small businesses that are getting killed.
Yeah.
Getting killed. 77% of job openings in America, the highest it's ever been, are with companies that have 250 or less employees. You're not getting job growth if these small businesses get hit by this. That's where the vulnerability is. I will just tell you, I don't fully agree on the 50 being a benefit. 50, 80, and 150 are all the same number. There's no trade happening at those levels. You have to get it below 50 towards trade. Why it's relevant is it signifies where the administration's going, which is why the weekend he did the 20% carve-out thing for Apple and NVIDIA. I knew he was going to go cut a deal because he knew that it was not true that this was only going to hurt China. Right. It was going to kill us.
I think we need to have a deal with China, and I think we need our big, beautiful bill for the economy to, hold up and stabilize and be able to move forward. But I really don't think it's going to have an impact on this market, to Dagan's point. I think it's really largely all built in already. So the administration better show up with something to keep things going, but I don't necessarily think that's going to be a market driver.
Can I say just real quickly, the one trade deal you're talking about that with UK announced yesterday, we had a trade surplus with them.
Right.
Trump administration has said over and over again that all these countries we have a trade deficit with are ripping us off. So presumably the only country we got to deal with so far, we're ripping them off. Of course, I don't believe that, but that's what they believe. My point is, there's not a real framework in that deal for the other countries. Not yet.
Not even but what about the 10% as sort of the baseline? I think
the main issue was opening new markets. Dagan referred to this with China, that we want them to be more of a customer. By the way, I do think they kept one part of that deal, Dagan, was soybean purchase and liquefied natural gas purchase until COVID. Then that all stopped. But again, if that's what we want to do is open new markets, I think that's going to be the real success that President Trump
for killing 1.1 million Americans and millions more around the globe. They could have at least kept buying our soybeans and LNG.
Well, someone has to be using it, and they shut down their country for 3 years.
No, well, they were functioning just fine.
Well, the UK, in the meantime, is going to be eating more of our beef.
That's right.
Buying more of our.
They were still
eating. We're going to be buying more of their Rolls-Royce.
They were still eating.
We're going to be buying more of their Rolls-Royce engines for Boeing jet planes.
Can I just quick for one thing? I also agree with you, David. I think the 50% is still high. I think he was bearing gifts to start the conversation and negotiation. I think what we see from the UK yesterday is that he's willing to talk. Yeah. He's listening to the CEOs around him. He's listening to his advisors. He's willing to talk to these countries. And I think you end up with a tariff, whatever the baseline will be, that's less than 50%.
But I agree with David wholeheartedly that the people who are suffering the most are the small business owners, and I hit that a couple of days ago, and they deserve a voice and the number to the bat phone in the White House, because they don't have access and they don't have enough people listening to them.
And they don't have access to capital markets to get through it. So they lose on all fronts here. I agree 100%.
Well, we shall see what may happen for them in Switzerland.
You, the American taxpayer, instead of paying for an upgrade of the air traffic control system, would be subsidizing liberal blue states run by kleptocrats where these GOP reps reside. So they have turned down $30,000 SALT deduction cap. That is $50 billion a year that they turn down. That's how much it would cost. It would cost, based on an estimate I have from an economist, $500 billion over 10 years. So that's not enough for them. You know what's enough for us? Nothing. get rid of the state and local tax deduction. I have had it with these people.
Now, Dagan, if nothing happens, the deduction is unlimited.
That's the game that they're playing.
No, it's not a game. It's
no, they're
leverage.
playing a game.
But it's real leverage that they have. And so I'm with you 100%. I am a high earner who files in California and New York. Okay, this thing hurts me as much as anybody, and it's an abysmal idea for South Dakota and Texas to be subsidizing New York. I'm with you 100% on the policy. But within the political gamesmanship going on, this is what happens when you're doing sunsetting tax provisions. They're now holding all the leverage. Because you know what? If they don't do anything, then New Yorkers and Californians are going to get a tax cut. And nobody else is.
David, can I tell you something? During this interview, I thought this was interesting. He actually admitted that there are vaccines that are rotting in warehouses right now. He took responsibility for that in the interview.
Why is he taking responsibility for that issue?
Yeah, that's what he said.
There's a lot about him that is so sanctimonious, it's very hard to listen to. I personally, as a man of faith, have a very hard time with people telling the world about them giving their money away. I think we're supposed to give money and not tell the world about it. There's a verse that kind of says that, actually. But look, the USAID had some things it did that were good, and it had a whole lot of things it did that were bad. And Bill Gates ran a very large company called Microsoft, where he knows the complexity of this basic reality no one wants to say. You can't go deal with an organization like USAID and right-size it and fix it and reform it and take away all the corrupt things they were doing that Dagan highlighted without some bad things happening. Why he wouldn't just grant the complexity of it? There wasn't an easy way to come in and fix this. I think that there were some decent things happening that now got funding cut off. I just think that was a necessary part of it because it got so out of control and no one was willing to go address it. There are criticisms I have of the way they did it. I wish they had done it with better communication along the way. But I'm sorry, there was no perfect way this was going to happen. There just wasn't.